Masechet Nazir Daf Samech Gimel. Topic today is about Tum'at Tehom. There's a distinction between a regular grave that people know about. Someone buried a person somewhere, which is just the regular laws, and that's different from Tum'at Tehom, a grave in the depth, something that nobody knew about. Maybe there was an avalanche and someone was buried in some place and nobody in the world knows about it. So we're going to see a certain leniency. This leniency, as the Gemara will explain, is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. It's not from a pasuk. It's not based on logic. It's just this exception. So here we go. Mishnah. Nazir shegileach v'noda lo shehu tameh. Im tum'a yedua soter, v'im tum'at tehom eno soter. You have a Nazir who finished his term. He's all the way on day 30, and he already shaved after 30. He already brought his korbanot, and he shaved. And now he found out that he had been tameh. He didn't realize, but sometime during day 20, he became tameh. He didn't know at that point, and now he found out. Here's a distinction. If it's a regular tum'ah that people know about, he didn't realize that he passed over a certain place, but now someone told him, I saw you passed over a certain place. There is a grave there. And this happened beforehand, but now he only found out now. Then that nullifies everything he did before. It nullifies his korbanot that he brought and the shaving that he brought. And as we're going to understand right now, it even nullifies the days that he counted. And he's going to have to go all the way back to the beginning and count all over again. We'll see by the end of the Gemara, we'll learn that it actually only nullifies 7 days. He just needs 7 more days so he can shave again. Basically, he has to do everything again. That's if it was a known grave. However, if it was an unknown grave, a grave of the depth, as it's called here, then it does not. Then he can go on, and he's finished, right? He shaved already, and he's done with his nizirut. So that's a leniency that if nobody knew about this grave, then and he only finds out about it after he's finished, then he can ignore it. However, if he found out about it before he shaved, then no matter what, it negates everything before, right? So even if it's a grave, an unknown grave, and he finds out about it on day 29, then or any time before he shaves, then it nullifies everything. Okay, kesad. Let's see an example. Yarad litbol b'm'ara v'nimsa met saf al pi ha'me'ara tameh. Nimsa mishuka bakarka ha'me'ara yarad lehaker tahor. Liteher mitumat met tameh shecheskat tameh tameh v'cheskat tahor tahor sheraglaim ladavar. So what would be a case where we could see this distinction? If a person goes to the mikveh in a cave, there's water in the cave, and he goes down there during to dip in the mikveh, and he finds there that there's a corpse that's floating near the mouth of the cave. That person is tameh. In other words, let's say during his nizirut on day 20 or whatever, he goes to the mikveh because he was tameh tumat sheretz, which is Nazir is allowed to be, but he wants to, and he goes there. And while he's there, ironically, he's going in there so that he can become tahor from tumat sheretz. But he comes into contact, or he's in tent impurity with this corpse, and so then he becomes tameh. All right. In that case, if he didn't know about it at that point, but someone then he found out that there was a corpse there after he finishes his nizirut, then he's going to have to be tameh, and it's going to undo everything from before. That's because this is a known source of tum'ah, and a known source of tum'ah negates all the days that he did before, even if he only finds out about it after he finished shaving. Okay, that's case 1. However, nimsa mishuka bakarka me'ara, if the corpse had been buried in the ground of the cave where it was unknown, and then he found out about it afterwards, after he finished, that's a case where we can be lenient. But even here, there is yet one more distinction, one more criteria. It's interesting because it brings kesad as if it's just giving an example of what came before, but actually now we're adding another criteria. And this is it. Yarad lehaker tahor, if he went into the mikveh just to cool himself off. Right, happens to be a mikveh or not. But he went into this water because it was hot out and he wanted to cool off. Then he has a presumption that he was tahor beforehand. And therefore, when he goes down, we continue that presumption of tahara. On the other hand, if he had gone into that mikveh to become tahor because he was tameh lamet, in other words, we have a Nazir, and on day 20 or whatever, he became tameh lamet, and now he had to restart. And when, during his purification from tumat met, he went to the mikveh. But there was this corpse in there, at that time, and which he found out about later. So that means that yes, it's in the depth, this corpse, but at the time that he went in, he was himself tameh lamet. In that case, he has a chazakah of tum'ah, and so we continue his tum'ah. Only if I had a chazakah that he was tahor before that, then he remains tahor. Now that we found out about it, because there are legs to it, right? It's more likely that he remains tahor if he was tahor already. That's the law of chazakah. To summarize, this leniency relies on three things. Number one, the grave that he had, or the source of tumat met that he had come into contact with during his nizirut, has to be an unknown source, an unknown grave that nobody knows about. That's one. Second is that he has to be that he found out about it only after he completed his nizirut, after he shaved. If he found out before, then he's going to have to undo. And third has to be that he was tahor in a chazakah of being tahor, not tameh lamet, at that time that he came into contact with that unknown grave. If you have all three of these criteria, then he can just ignore the fact that he had come into contact with this unknown source of purity. He was presumed to be pure. He found out about it after he was already finished. We don't make him go back. He's done with his nizirut. That's the chidush of the Mishnah. Okay, Gemara. Minahane mile. What's the source? Where Gemara is assuming that there must be a source in Scripture. We're going to see two opinions. Amar Rabbi Eliezer, Amar Kera, V'chi yamut met alav befeta pitom, alav b'mechuveret lo. Pasuk regarding Nazir says, if a Nazir should be going along the way, and a person dies upon him, all of a sudden, right? He didn't have control over it. Now, this word alav is extra. Could have just said, if a person dies, kiamut met befeta pitom. What do you mean, alav? Alav means that it's clear to him that there was a corpse there. If it was not clear to him, meaning unknown, then there's a leniency, right? Only if it's clear to him, then he has to stop all his days, go all the way back to the beginning. And so this is a source that if it's unknown, and also all the other criteria, he finished shaving already, then he does not have to go back and ruin his nizirut. That's source number one. From this source, it sounds like it's just that he doesn't know himself, just says alav. Okay, Resh Lakish, however, gives a different opinion and says the pasuk Resh Lakish amar amar kerakiye tameh lanefesh o bederech rechoka ki derech maderech begalui afkol begalui. Resh Lakish quotes the law of Pesach Sheni. If a person was either tameh during on Yud Daled Nisan, or he was very far away and was not able to make it to do the Korban Pesach. So we learn ki derech, that we're going to compare the tumat nefesh has to be something that's like a road, just like a road is open and it's available, everybody knows about it and can use it. So too, the type of tumah has to be something that is known. If there's an unknown type of impurity, the case would be like this. A person was going to do his Korban Pesach. He became Tameh Lamet from an unknown source. He didn't know about it at the time, right? But he passed over some place where there was some body buried, and nobody knew that it was there. He did his Korban Pesach, and they found out afterwards that he actually was tameh. Well, so what does he have to do? Do it again? Does he have to do Pesach Sheni? So if the corpse was a known corpse, then yes, he has to do Pesach Sheni. If it was an unknown corpse, then he doesn't. Right? So that's the law here. If he was tameh lanefesh in a known way, then he has to do Pesach Sheni. An unknown way, from this source, sounds like unknown to anyone, right? Because this has to do with public. Everybody knows about a road, and so it has to be. And if anybody knew about this grave, then that would make him have to do it again. So to be unknown, according to this source, has to be unknown to everyone. All right, so now we have two sources. The law will apply to both cases of a Nazir and someone doing Korban Pesach. But the question is, which source do we learn it from? Okay, so now we ask, Ve'ela haditnan, ezoi tumat tehom, kol she'eno makira, echad besof ha'olam, ava makira echad besof ha'olam, en zot tumat tehom. We have, it says ditnan, which usually introduces a Mishnah, but not always. In this case, it's introducing a Tosefta. We're going to see the full Tosefta in a few minutes, but it reads, what is the definition of an unknown source of tum'ah? It means anything that no one, not even a person at the end of the earth, knows about it. Nobody in the world knows about it. But if there's someone that knows about it, then that's not called tumat tehom. So now we ask, Bishlam alaman damar ki derech shapir. This makes sense according to Resh Lakish. They learned it from derech. That makes sense, right? Everybody knows about a road. So if there's any, right, so that means it's about the public knowledge. If anybody in the whole world knows about it, then it's called a known source of tumah, like a road. Ba'ela leman damar mechuvedet lo ki makira echad besof ha'olam may haveh. But according to the first source, it says if he knows about it, because it says alav. So that sounds like it only makes a difference if this Nazir himself knew about this grave or didn't know about it. But if there was someone at the end of the world that happened to know about it, according to him, it should still be called an unknown grave. But that goes against the Tosefta that says it's about public knowledge. So that's question number one. Vetu hadetanya mosemet mushkav lerochba shel derech bitrumat tameh benazir b'asiyat pesach tahor ma'ishena. Second question is from another Tosefta, also in Zavim, that says if someone finds a dead body that's laid across the road, the width of the road, but it's buried underneath and nobody knew about it. Because it's buried lengthwise, anyone who passes over that road must have passed over that grave, right? There would be no way to get around it. So if it has to do with the question of terumah, now he's a kohen and he wants to eat terumah, and then he finds out, oh, there was a grave under the road there that no one knew about. For terumah, we're machmir and we say, sorry, you're a tameh. Even though you didn't know about it, even though it was tumat tehom, you're still tameh. But for the laws of Nazir and doing Pesach, if a Nazir finds out afterwards, after he shaves, oh, that road had this, we found it later, it had the grave on it, or someone did Korban Pesach, but he went along that road, and now we found out about it after that it was a hidden grave there. He's tahor, and the question is, what's the difference? Right? Why would you not learn the law for terumah as well, and say that also there's a presumption of tahara, and because it was unknown to anyone, you can keep going, right? What's the logic to separate between one and the other, right? Even if you learn it from Nazir or from Pesach, you should be able to apply it to other cases like for terumah. And so our answer is Ela tumat tehom gemara gemirila. So rather, this law of tumat tehom, this special leniency, is not actually derived from any pasuk, but is actually an oral tradition. And these pasukim that we brought were just an asmachta to a nice mnemonic, but it's not really from this pasuk, and that will explain this first answer that this mechuveret law says you're right. It's not an exact derivation; it's really an oral law, and because it's an oral law, not only does it not actually come from a pasuk, but it also does not have to fit into the normal logic of halacha. Here, it's just an exception to the rule, like in grammar. It's an exception. Why? That's just the way it is. Okay, so now we know where it comes from. Now, im ad shelo gileach, the Mishnah mentioned that the cutoff point at which it would make a difference in halacha is the time of shaving. If the person found out right before he shaved, oh, you had been, when it came into contact with this unknown grave, then he nullifies everything. But after he shaves, then he's good to go, and he doesn't have to worry about that unknown grave. So we ask, Man Tana, who is the author of this Mishnah? Amar Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Eliezer hi damar tiglachat me'akevet. So Rabbi Yochanan explains it has to be Rabbi Eliezer. He's the one that says that shaving is the cutoff point. When a Nazir shaves, that's when he's finished his Nazirut and he goes on. This is different from a Rabbanan that said that it's when he sprinkles the blood, which is right before he shaves. Even before he shaves, as long as he sprinkles blood of one of the korbanot, then he's done with his Nazirut, he can go drink wine. So from this Mishnah, from the fact that it says cutting the hair is the end of the Nazirut, so it must be that this Mishnah is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Good. Rami bar Chama asked the following question. He is always known to ask very technical questions. And so he says, Nitma betoch melot v'noda lo le'achar melot mahu. If a person became tameh during his counting, but he only found out about it after his finished counting, what is the law? Now, let's review. Our Mishnah was talking about a case where he became tameh during the counting, day 20, and then he found out about it after he shaved, after he's finished altogether. Okay, that's where we say if it was an open grave, a known grave, then he has to go all the way back, and if it's an unknown grave, then he can forget about it. That was the case of the Mishnah. But here we're talking about if he found out about it before he shaved, after he finished the counting. So he finished counting the 30 days, and now, let's say it's day 31, but he didn't yet bring his korbanot, didn't yet shave. So he finished his counting on the one hand, but he didn't do the concluding ceremony on the other hand. So is this in-between time? What will be the law? Do we go by the time of the knowledge? And the knowledge, when he found out about it, is afterwards, and therefore we can be more lenient. We're going to see in a second, this is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer that says, as long as you finished your counting, even at that point, let's say he becomes tameh, at that point, after he finished his counting, then he doesn't have to go all the way back to the beginning. He just has to wait 7 more days just so he could have something to shave. And he doesn't go back to the beginning. So would we say the same thing here? Because he found out about it, even though it became tameh on the 20th, on the day 20, but he only found out about it now after day 30. So we follow the time of the knowledge, or not? Do we say, well, no, you became tameh, what, day 20? So you were tameh then. So then you have to go all the way back to the beginning and add 30 more days. Right, so that's the question. Ulamai, let me start. What's the application of the question regarding negation? Right, again, if we follow the time when he actually became tameh, that was before day 30, then he is tameh. He has to go do a tahara process and start all over again. Same as if he found out back then. Whereas if you say we follow the time of when you found out, that makes the difference. So even though you can't tameh before on day 20, but you only found out now on day 31, so then it's as if you became tameh now on day 31, in which case you only have to add 7 more days. That's the question of Rami bar Chama. And we have an answer. Amar Rava Tashema. Im ad shelo gileach ben kach o ben kach soter. Our Mishnah said if he found out about his tumah, either became tameh, found out about his tumah before he shaved, then no matter what, no matter the case, no matter if it's a known grave or an unknown grave, it will negate all the days before. Now, hechidame, well, exactly what is the case here? If you're talking about a case where he became tameh on the day 20 and found out about it also on day 20 or any time before day 30, then do you need to tell me this law? This is explicit in the Torah. It says if you become tameh, then you have to negate all the days before. Rather, Mishnah must be talking about a case where he found out about tum'ah after he finished counting, before he got to shave, but after he finished counting, and it says you negate everything before. So we can conclude that, yes, it goes by the time of when you became tameh, and that's why you negate everything that came before. Okay, that's Rava's answer. So now we have we follow-up question. Wait, I want to clarify more. When you say it's going to negate what came before, is it going to negate all 30 days or only 7 days? So we answer leman. It depends on who we're following. If you follow Rabbanan, then it's going to be a simple matter that it's going to negate everything, because according to Rabbanan, if you find out even after the completion of the days, or even if you become tameh after the completion of the days, then it negates everything before. So according to Rabbanan, actually, this would make no difference. Whereas according to the Eliezer, anytime you become tameh after the completion of the term, then you only negate 7 days. And so the question of Rami Bar Chama really would only make sense according to Rabbi Eliezer, which is just fine, because right before Rami Bar Chama's question, we already established that this Mishnah follows Rabbi Eliezer, so it makes sense that he would be asking the question for Rabbi Eliezer, and that's why, according to Rabbi Eliezer, if you became tameh after you finished counting and before the after you finish counting, then it would only negate 7 days, and so then it makes sense to ask if it became tameh before but found out after. Do we go by the time of tumah or by the time of finding out? Okay, good. Amar lach hanemila ki nitma achar melot, v'hai lifnei melot hu, od mashanehacha didia achar melot hi. Now we can explain that Rami Bar Chama would tell you, here's my question, and my question is within the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. When Rabbi Eliezer says that he only has to negate 7 days, is that true that he says that when he became tameh after he finished his counting? And in this case, he actually became tameh before he finished his counting, and so he has to recount all 30 days? Or do we say, no, this case is different because the knowledge of it came after he finished counting, and we follow the time of the knowledge. It doesn't matter when he actually became tameh, it only finds out when he found out about it. And he found out about it after he finished counting, and therefore he should only be negated 7 days. And so that was his question all along. Umina, and now we can explain, this was Rava's answer before, we can answer from the Mishnah itself. Katane ben kach u ben kach soter, vela kami palge. The Mishnah says, no matter what, doesn't matter what kind of impurity it was, he negates the days before, and it doesn't make any distinction. So from the fact that it doesn't make any distinction, it sounds like it doesn't really, it doesn't matter. We're going to follow the 7 days. Whether he actually became tameh after the finished the counting, or he didn't become tameh after he finished or if he became tameh before but only found out about it at this point, still it would negate only 7 days. And see, according to the Eliezer, this would be true even after he shaved. If it was known tum'ah, then also it would negate just 7 days, right? If this is true before he shaves, then all the more after shaves, not going to have to go all the way back to the beginning and count another 30 days. It would be, since he didn't know about it until the time period ended, until he finished the 30-day count, he didn't know that he became tameh, so it will have to add only 7 days. If it's unknown purity and he already shaved, then he doesn't have to add anything at all. But if it's a known purity, and then he does have to add 7 days, whether he finished shaving or he didn't shave but finished counting. Okay, this is all vela kami palge. This last line is actually ambiguous, and you could some interpret it to mean that there's no difference and he has to count 30 days. But we interpret it that way. All right, good. Now, we quoted a snippet from this long baraita, and now we're going to quote the entirety of that baraita, Tosefta. Tenor Rabbanan, hamoseh met mutal ruchba shel derech litrumat tameh u'nazir b'oseh pesach tahor. If there is a corpse that is in the middle of the road, and it's buried widthwise across the entire road, it was buried and no one knew about it, and then someone found it afterwards, for an application of terumah, we tell the guy, sorry, Kohen, sorry, you are tamen, you can't eat terumah. But for a Nazir and someone that went and did Pesach, And at that time they thought they were tahor, but now they found out afterwards, oh, wait a second, you were tameh. You became tameh. You passed down that road while you were Nazir, or while you were on the way to do Pesach, since it was unknown, and he only found about it after, so they're tahor, and he doesn't have to do Pesach Sheni, and he doesn't have to negate the days that he did. Okay, that's the law. But now we're going to qualify it, limit it in a few ways. This is only true that the teruma we're machmir on teruma only if there's no other way, no way to pass by around the corpse, right? If the corpse takes up the entire road, but if there's a shoulder of the road or somewhere in between one lane where he could get by, then we presume that, or maybe he went on in the area where the corpse, where there was no corpse, and therefore the kohen, he can continue and eat teruma, right? So only if there's no place to go, but if there is another place to go, even for teruma, that's tahor. And also, when do we say all that law? Shemisao shalem avam mishubar meforak afilu en makom laavod hayshin an shema ben pirkin avad. Another leniency for the kohen. We're only going to tell him that it's tameh not only if he takes up the whole road, but also if the body is whole. But if it's in pieces or broken, then even if there's no other place to go, but maybe there's some place in between and he didn't walk in exactly a straight line, and so we Chayshinan usually means worry. Here it means we assume for the best that he could have gone between the bones, the parts of this body, and therefore he is tahor. He can keep eating teruma. On the other hand, if the body was not just in the ground in pieces, but rather was in a box, in a grave, and then the grave itself joins the pieces together. The tuma fills up the entire grave, and then he wouldn't be able to rely on this leniency even if it's broken. Furthermore, the and furthermore, when do we give this leniency that if the corpse was dismembered, that he's okay? That's only if he's walking on his feet. But if he's loaded with a heavy burden or riding on an animal, then we have to assume that he's tameh. Because if you're walking on your feet, it could be that you didn't touch. You can become tameh lamet in three ways from a corpse: either by touching it, by moving it even if you don't touch it, or by being under a tent with it. So if you're walking without a burden, so then you're standing straight, and so you're not necessarily making a tent, and you're walking nimbly, and so it could be that you just passed right over it, and walked between it and didn't become tameh. But if you're carrying a burden or an animal, so now you're hunched over, you're taking up more space, you're going more slowly, so it's impossible that you will not either have touched it or pushed it or made a tent over it, and therefore that person is tameh, that kohen. Another limitation, all of these leniencies were only if it's unknown, but if it's a known corpse, then all three of these people, not only the kohen, also the nazir, and the person who did his korban pesach, they're all going to be temeim, right? There was a corpse there. Maybe this guy didn't know about it. This particular nazir or particular person doing korban pesach, maybe he didn't realize, he wasn't paying attention. But if it's a known corpse, then he'd tell him after, oh, you passed by that? Look, there was a corpse there, right? Everybody knows about it. Some people know about it, and then so you tell him about it, then, we were tameh lamet, so then he has to go back and redo his nezirut or redo his korban pesach. Good. Now the Baraita is going to elaborate and explain what is the definition of unknown tum'ah. Kol shen makira echad besof ha'olam. Makira echad besof ha'olam, and zot tum'at tehom. Even it's only tum'at tehom if no one in the world knows about it, right? Like just someone fell, an avalanche, and no one knew that he's there. That's called unknown. But if someone knows about it, then it's not tumat tehom. Hayat tamun beteven or bisrorot harezot tumat tehom. Furthermore, it's only called unknown if it's actually concealed. He is under hay or under pebbles, right? And it will be impossible for anyone to see it until it gets unburied. However, if this corpse is in a dark place or in the cleft of a rock, or in water, right? It's somewhere in the water, on the water, a dark place, a cleft of a rock, but it's a place that is visible. So even if the person, died without anybody knowing, in a dark place, in the cleft of a rock, so that is not called tumat tehom because it is visible. Someone passing by could see it, and eventually will see it. So that's not called tumat tehom. So it's not that even though no one knows about it, if it's visible, it's no good. So it has to be that two things: no one knows about it, and it's not visible without uncovering it. And furthermore, v'lo amru tumat tehom ela lemet bilvad. This whole law, this leniency of tumat tehom, that only applies to corpse impurity, not any other kind. If it's corpse impurity, it was invisible, no one knew about it, and all the other criteria we said before, then for a Nazir, finds out about it after he's already done, then he can ignore it. But if it's for other applications, other types of tumah, like tumat sheretz, right? A mouse dies under something, and a person didn't know about it. So we don't say, oh, well, sorry, you didn't, you don't say, well, since you don't know about it, it's okay, you're not tamed la sheretz. Or for a zav, right, and he didn't know about it. So in all those cases, it doesn't matter if nobody knows, or one person knows, or everybody knows, there's no distinction, and there's no further leniency for an unknown source of that tumah, only for tumat met, and only for the applications that we mentioned above. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.